I'm sitting here with Jonathan Lewis. Mr. Lewis, can you tell me about the Kingian theory and what's it all about, a little history, and update me to what's going on in California and Chicago?
Sure. The Kingian nonviolence theory is heavily influenced by a lot of different other folks. Dr. King was very eclectic in his thinking and pulled from a lot of different sources. Gandhi was definitely a heavy influence, Jesus Christ, absolutely. And many folks have found a way to use that philosophy to transform their communities. Speaking directly out of the Nashville movement, when James Lawson came down to first prepare the soon-to-be SNCC members to understand the philosophy, the transformational power of it, and how when one can view conflict as an opportunity versus tragedy, that great things can come out of it. And I was fortunate enough to be introduced to the philosophy by the current chairman of SCLC, Dr. Bernard Lafayette Jr., as a student at the University of Rhode Island in 1999. And I've been able to learn a great deal about the skill and will, the steps or principles of that philosophy, and how, looking back, the victories that were made based on, it wasn't a dream, if you will, but it was a deep strategy, similar to the level of strategy that you would find in the military, how things were laid out, plans were not just thrown together, but it was strategically placed and timed. From my introduction to it came from Dr. Lafayette and stems from his last conversation with Dr. King around the need to institutionalize and internationalize Kingian nonviolence because of its power. It's one thing that we're not taught, if you will, growing up throughout school. We're taught science, math, English, and other subjects, so we become proficient in it. But we're not proficient in dealing with conflict, and that's the most constant thing that we experience. So after Dr. Lafayette having that last conversation with Dr. King, he took that as his next marching orders, if you will, on what was important to prepare next generation so that we didn't revisit some of the ills of our past. And, excuse me, I've been fortunate enough to travel with Dr. Lafayette to South Africa, to Mexico, Medellin, Colombia, Israel, Palestine, and Nigeria to see how some of this can be placed into other cultural contexts and still work. And I think that speaks to the universal power of the Kingian nonviolence theory. Excuse me.
Can you give me the concept, the purpose, some guidelines on the Kingian theory?
Well,
How does it work?
Well, it works. It's not a magic wand, I have to say that. It's something that must be worked. But the guiding principles of it are found in the Pilgrimage to Nonviolence that Dr. King wrote in this book called Stride Towards Freedom, where the first principle speaks to courage and the need for us to be willing not only to articulate our speech towards justice, but to walk and sacrifice our bodies for it as well. And not to do it for the now, but the second principle speaks to the future, which is the beloved community is the framework for the future. And almost taking a little bit from our Native American brothers and sisters and thinking about 7 generations ahead and the work that we're doing right now to build that beloved community, that space where folks reach their fullest human potential and each of us help that happen. And today, one other guiding principle of the philosophy is not to attack persons, but to get to the root causes of the issue. And right now in our society, our policies, our practices are to attack the individuals and not even to ever get to the root cause of their behavior.
If we look at the youth today, the violence in the neighborhood, the black-on-black crime,
Mm-hmm.
how have some of your programs worked and where?
Well, specifically in Chicago at North Lawndale College Prep Academy, where in 2009, in that community there was roughly 508 people being murdered in that year, while there was 327 soldiers in Afghanistan and Iraq who were being killed. These students in Chicago believed that they could make a difference. And similar to Birmingham and other locations where the organizers focused on working with the popular students or the influential students in the school, Dr. Lafayette, myself, and some others went down there to train 25 students under the leadership of a woman named Tiffany Childress. She's a teacher in that school. And through training those 25 set a precedence in their school about what was acceptable, what was the way that they should be operating as a community. and they did not allow for violence to get any attention, if you will, but it was all about promoting peace. And these 25 then went forth and exposed their entire school in the philosophy. And within the first year, they were able to reduce violence by 75%. And since then, they've continued that same program, and they included incentives, if you will. So after a certain amount of days of peace, the students would get a dress down day, they get a pizza party, they get a DJ in the school, just to reinforce the need for, to reinforce the need for new programs. They don't allow folks to get suspended anymore. They do in-house suspension, where these trainers come in and they present the Kingian Nonviolence for the curriculum to those that have been getting into some types of conflicts or whatnot. And over the last 5 years, they've continued that and reduced violence by 90% in that particular place. And I think that's a good indication that if you're willing to invest in what you want to see, you'll get returns on that. They did away with their metal detectors, they reduced their security guards, and they invested that money that they saved into promoting peace on their campus and creating a group called the Peace Warriors, where that's what they do. They fight for peace. Being a warrior is not one that is only about violence, but it's one who's engaged or experiencing conflict, and they found a new way to respond to their conflicts there in Chicago.
Now look at Sandy Hook, the shooting there, and since then there's been a outcry in terms of some saying have more police in the schools, have weapons in the school. You're saying that we can do away with that and put money in terms of prevention.
Absolutely. Prevention. We can save our money if we're willing to invest in prevention versus intervention. One thing that the kids in Chicago speak about is that when they had security guards in their school, it only really taught them to hate security guards. It didn't really help them create a safe space. And if our response is always to more military aspect of if it's to bring in more forceful interventions, it's going to get that type of response from the students, from our community. We have to be more creative in our responses.
Now look at Michelle Alexander, talk about the new Jim Crow. How do we change that concept in terms of the school to prison pipeline? This is what you're saying. We need to talk more about the nonviolence.
Absolutely.
The Kingian theory.
Absolutely.
Now the other piece they're saying is that they're acting out because they do not know who they are, and they have no history of themselves. Is that correct?
Well, I'd say that's definitely a contribution to anyone's behavior. If you're not clear on who you are and your fullest capabilities, you'll respond based on what others have told you or what you have gleamed to believe just by looking around. And for example, with the work in the jails that I've been fortunate enough to do out in California in the San Bruno County Jail, many of those men had never heard of an alternative. All they heard was turn the other cheek. And they didn't hear about the philosophy, the strategy that goes along with it. And one of the common comments that we get from the men in the jail is this: man, I wish I had met you the day before I did that thing that got me here. You would have been able to show me a new perspective. Because in our communities, we're not giving our citizens understanding of what it is to be a fully participating citizen in our community. We're not giving them the skills necessary to understand how to participate in government, how to sway opinion and create the changes that we're looking for.
Now listen to Harry Belafonte at the NAACP Image Award, and he is saying that the entertainers are not giving direction in terms of getting people involved and supporting, and they were saying that music has a lot to do with one's attitude.
Definitely.
Can you expound on that? You had worked with?
Yeah, I had a chance to work with Harry Belafonte as the national training director for his organization called the Gathering for Justice between 2008 and roughly 2011. And Mr. Belafonte always speaks about how change will not come unless the comfortable are willing to be uncomfortable. Our artists have been risen to a very noble status in our community, if you will, and live in a space of comfortability as far as their finances. And if they're not willing to speak to what the desires of the community are versus the current crisis in the community, all they keep hearing over and over in their mind is that things are bad, things are bad. And the songs of the past that got attention on the radio spoke of hope. And the artists that are out there doing the work today that speak to that stuff are not getting the airtime necessary. Because, yeah, music truly influences our behavior. Sometimes we have a song singing in our head and we don't even know how it got there. And it's not speaking to our deepest desires, but it's speaking to some mainstream distraction, if you will. And Mr. Belfonte is absolutely right. That artists need to be willing to walk amongst the people, if you will. And that's what Mr. B did. That's what Sammy Davis Jr. did. A lot of other artists took the time out to go with the folks and support the folks from the grassroots level. The music today is speaking to some upper echelon experience that very few in the community will ever experience. So folks are trying to live that life. And it's unfortunate. I wish that artists today would speak more to the love of our community, the respect that we have for our brothers, our sisters, our mothers, our daughters. And that would change or influence the mindset of today's youth instead of just wobbling with it, if you will.
Are there some suggestions?
Absolutely, some suggestions that if we want to see a peaceful change, we can't continue to do the same nonsense of the past. We have 2013 years that prove to us that if we continue to pass violent policies or practices, that's what we're going to get. We need to invest in the next 2013 years, if you will, in nonviolence, in ways to transform our conflicts and teach our kids from a very young age, from pre-K all the way up to 12th grade. And it's not a it wouldn't be an optional class, it wouldn't be an add-on after-school program, but it would be something, a core component of the curriculum that all kids around the country would receive and would understand how they could transform their lives by trying things a little bit differently and not resulting into the violence that's promoted so much through mainstream media as well as in many of our entertainment opportunities.
Any last words?
The SCLC is an organization that has started a legacy of looking at conflict as a transformational opportunity. And as we move forward in the wake of 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, SCLC is putting its effort into doing that. And the organization I work with, the Positive Peace Warrior Network, is in full support of and is becoming an affiliate of SCLC to continue Dr. King's legacy and the learnings of nonviolence, because that's truly, I believe, the only way that we'll be able to change our future is if we change the constant violent approaches that we've been using.
Now, there are some that are saying that SCLC has served its course, but do you look at the issues then and now are the same or more?
Absolutely. I get asked that question a lot. Like, Jonathan, what do you think Dr. King would be working on today if he was around? And my response is, if the situation was the same, he'd be working on the same stuff. Because if you can look back at any of his writings, he's describing our current situation. And some might even say it is worse, because we believe that things have changed. And policies have changed, but our attitudes have not changed at that speed.
Now, I guess the other piece is, I'm looking at that with Dr. King back in the 60s, you had individuals coming together as a unit. But you're looking at now, it seems as if we have classism.
Absolutely.
And it's not, if it's not me involved, they don't want to be a part of it. So how do we get the community to come back and to embrace your philosophy instead of saying we just need more metal detectors, more guns in school?
Well, it's very true that there's a sense of competition amongst the nonprofit organizations. And we have more nonprofit organizations today than we've ever had before, yet we seem to be fighting amongst ourselves, thinking that one way is better than another way. And the philosophy here is not saying that your issue is not important, but there's a way that we can work together in order to achieve each of our goals. And the only way to achieve a successful campaign for humanity is if we can find a way to work together. The different efforts in Selma, in Birmingham, in Nashville didn't happen because one organization did all of the work. Many organizations supported the overall work, and that was trying to find a change that would affect all of us. And that was one thing that SCLC has been good in the past, is that finding an issue, a local issue that had national impact and that struck a chord in the hearts and minds of many. And it wasn't just about one particular group, but it was about humanity and lifting us all up to experience our fullest human potential.
I guess in closing, what does this day, April the 4th, mean to you?
It means to me that they may have killed the man, but they did not kill the dream. They did not kill all of us who were influenced by that dream. I was born in 1977. I wasn't even on this planet when Dr. King walked this earth. But his message, his example has influenced many of us to pick up the gavel and to continue fighting, or the baton, and just to try to go that next lap in honor of not only Dr. King, but all those who supported Dr. King who we would never know. And it's to sit here at the SCLC office and to share with you what's been going on as far as Dr. King's philosophy around the country, I think speaks to, I think it's, if it's possible, he's got a smile on his face where he rests right now. Thank you.
Thank you.